Hello, my name is Robert Goodwin, and this is Law on the Line. I would like to welcome my guest, Ellen Schwartz, who is a colleague and now who is a member of the organization known as Woman Aware, where she is responsible as the Director of Legal Resources. Ellen, welcome to Law on the Line.
Thank you, Bob. Nice to see you.
And I know that you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into the subject matter.
Sure. Well, for a number of years, as you know, I was a practicing attorney, primarily in Middlesex County. And then not quite 2 years ago, I closed my practice. And I had a strong belief that there was some more important work for me to do. Not that being a family law attorney was not important, but this work I thought was really a calling. So I came over to Women Aware. And I work at the Family Justice Center now, which is part of Women Aware. We opened about 4 years ago. And I'm their Director of Legal Resources.
So tell us, where is Women Aware located?
Women Aware, the main office is in New Brunswick on Livingston Avenue. We are part of Women Aware. Our Family Justice Center is located at 100 Bayard Street. So we're convenient to both of the courthouses.
Are you a Middlesex County organization, or are you statewide?
We are primarily Middlesex County.
Okay. So as a Director of Legal Resources and that's a mouthful,
yeah,
at the Family Justice Center, which is, I understand, as you said, Women Aware is the umbrella agency. Right. Tell us what you do. So those folks that know you as an attorney and those who are going to meet you today on this show.
Well, I do a lot of different things. Lately, I've gotten more involved in legislative work. The domestic violence community had a very good year last year in 2023. There was a lot of really important legislation that was passed. So I was in Trenton a couple times working with a few of the organizations that we do work with, advocating and buttonholing senators and congresspeople, asking them to support the legislation. Sometimes I'm in court. I back up the legal advocates. We have 2 full-time legal advocates that work for us now. Occasionally I go to court and I back them up. And just so we're clear, I do not practice law. Those days are behind me. The advocates are court adjacent. Obviously, we don't work for the court system. But they serve as kind of a liaison between the victims and the court staff. And I try to help them when I can and, other things here and there.
It seems to me that domestic violence issues are at an all-time high in this country for many reasons. And we're asking the court to adjudicate these issues that involve, couples. It could be same-sex. It could be, of course, opposite-sex couples. It involves people of all ages, all walks of life, demographics, income levels. So, if you will, very briefly, so our audience understands, and we all hear about victims of domestic violence. What does that really mean, and how does that person have access or gets access to the courts?
Well, one of the best ways for them to get access to the courts is to call us. So I'm going to insert our hotline number at least a couple times while we're speaking.
And do it right now.
Yeah, 732-249-4504. That is our hotline. That line is answered 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There will be a live person on the other end of the phone that can help you.
From Women Aware? From
Women Aware. That is staffed by Women Aware professionals.
I hear this number on this show, and I'm in Hunterdon County or Somerset County. Will that number also direct me to the appropriate agency or similar sister agency in that county?
I have a list of all of the other county agencies tacked up on the bulletin board in my office, so if I get a call that someone is looking for help in Union County, Mercer County, Hunterdon County, as you said, yes, we will make those referrals. We want to get people to the best place that they can get services.
I need a referral. What kind of advice would you give or is given by Women Aware for those folks that need help immediately?
Well, we, at the Family Justice Center, we're primarily focused on legal.
Correct.
Right? We also have a safe house. There are all kinds of services and counseling programs that Women Aware offers. But I'll talk to you about what we do at the Family Justice Center. We have an intake specialist. She's usually the first point of contact. And she does some preliminary screening to find out what people need, what kind of services they're looking for. Is the situation emergent? Do we have to get police there? Do we have to get medical assistance? You know, all those things. And then what she will usually do is get the demographics for the person that we're trying to assist. And then that call will be sent to one of the advocates, sometimes me, sometimes the other advocates, and we will try to ascertain the individual's needs. You know, what do you need? What's happening? Have you filed a domestic violence restraining order? Do you know how? We can tell you how. Do you understand the process for filing for child support? You know, we do some ancillary things also. Child support, divorce, you know, all of those things. And we have, as I explained to you before, we talked a bit offline before, we have a number of partners that we work with. The Family Justice Center concept involves working with other agencies and organizations. And I can read to you.
You mentioned to me earlier that you work with about a dozen partners through the Family Justice Center.
We do, and I never remember all of them, so I have my notes, I'm going to list them for you. We work with Middlesex County itself, the Office of Human Services, Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office, the County Center for Empowerment, Central Jersey Legal Services. They're a big partner if people need legal assistance and they qualify for pro bono or free legal assistance. We refer them to Central Jersey. Jewish Family Services Partners is another organization that will provide pro bono services. The American Friends Service Committee, they focus their work on people with immigration challenges. Middlesex County Board of Social Services for people that need WIC or SNAP or some other program. We work with DCP&P, which is under the DCF, Division of Child, I'm saying it wrong.
Family?
Thank you. The Division of Child Protection and Permanency is DCP&P. They're under the state agency, Division of Children and Families, I think. Coming Home, we work with Manavi, which is an organization that assists primarily victims of South Asian descent. We work with Town Clock. We work with a Partnership for Change. So we have a number of agencies that we partner with.
So I'm a victim of domestic violence, and there's an incident that's happening in my home now.
Right.
Typically, people call 911. Is that fair to say?
Sure.
And then police officers are dispatched to the location, and they ascertain whether or not an incident has occurred, and based upon their preliminary determination, they would recommend or that perhaps a complaint for domestic violence is filed.
Right.
At that point, the complaint is filed, and
well, I don't want to skip a very important step.
Go ahead.
We try to make sure that all of the police departments in our various municipalities have our literature. They have contact information so that they can give the information to people who are victims. Hopefully, they will contact us.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to integrate what the organization does, Women Aware, Family Justice Center, with what's happening on the street and in the court system when the police basically state that we're going to present the complaint to a municipal court judge if it's off hours, or we suggest very strongly now, and let's assume there's no arrest that's been made, because if it's an aggravated assault or something along those lines.
If there's visible signs of injury.
Or it's visible signs of injury, correct.
An arrest is mandatory. Sure.
The defendant will be, the assailant will be arrested, but not necessarily. Now they need the victim to file the complaint.
Correct.
So the complaint is now either filed in municipal or it's filed in the Superior Court intake.
Correct.
I want to know, and I want our audience to understand, how do they learn about you? You mentioned it very briefly.
Right.
And how do they then proceed with your assistance from the beginning through the process?
Right. That's a long answer.
I know.
The police
That's why you're our guest.
There we go. The police departments have been wonderful partners to us. They have made sure that victims have the information. They are encouraged to at least talk to us, seek out the information. A victim should never be pushed or there should be no insistence that somebody file a domestic violence complaint if they're not ready, and we're very careful about that. But we want people to know their options. Sometimes they don't realize that they can have the protections of a domestic violence order. So the police will do that. We also have throughout Middlesex County what we call DVRTs, domestic violence response teams. They are volunteers, and if they get a call out from a police department, it can be 6 p.m., it can be 2 a.m., they will get a call out, hey, we have somebody here who's a victim of domestic violence, can you come and sit with her? And the role of the DVRT, volunteer, again, these are volunteers, lovely people, who will go and sit with this individual at the police station. They will have our literature with them, hopefully, and they will explain to them some of their options. But their role is very limited. Once we're done at the police station, the DVRT member goes home, and then the individual has to decide what they want to do.
So that's the integration at that point. And
Right.
then let's assume that the individual is listening carefully.
Right.
And they haven't yet elected to file a complaint at either municipal court. A judge would hear the matter, or an intake coming into the administration the courthouse in New Brunswick. At what point what percentage of people seek out your relief from the get-go? If you know those,
It's hard to know that stat. It really is hard to know that. I would have a very difficult time pinning that down.
Okay,
but sometimes people just call for information. You know, somebody may call and say, I had an incident last night and the police were here and my husband or my partner or my family member, it could be a brother or father, was arrested. And by the way, I don't mean in any way, shape, or form to suggest that all the perpetrators are male and all the victims are female. I don't mean to suggest that. We help anybody who's a victim. Right. But just for purposes of this discussion, somebody may call and say the police were here last night, there was an incident with my husband, I have 2 young children, I'm afraid, he was removed from the house, the police asked him to leave, he left, what do I do? So a lot of the calls are informational, and that's what we try to go through initially, try to figure out, assess the needs of the person that's calling us, and that's why our partners are terrific, because sometimes they don't necessarily want to proceed directly to legal, but they need other services, other assistance. Maybe they need medical, maybe they've sustained injuries in an assault. We want to make sure that they get medical attention. One thing I will tell you that is extremely important that we pay a lot of attention to is strangulation. And there's been a lot written about that, and you know the governor has recently elevated the crime of strangulation to a second degree, right? Second degree?
I believe so.
Yeah. We want to make sure that people who have been strangled get the appropriate medical evaluation, and whether that's a CT scan, an MRI, or whatever they need. We have a forensic nurse examiner, and she's got a team. They work out of the prosecutor's office, and if there is that type of event, we try to encourage them, get yourself to the hospitals, Robert Wood or St. Peter's normally in New Brunswick. They will call out the forensic nurse examiner, and the appropriate examinations will be given, because it doesn't take very much pressure or very much time to kill someone. And I'm not trying to be overly dramatic, but we pay an awful lot of attention to making certain that anybody that's been a victim of strangulation, at the very least, gets a thorough medical exam.
No, it's a very good point, and I know that the police, as a former municipal prosecutor, look very carefully, at a victim, and if there is any kind of markings on their neck, that automatically is a basis for the referral to the prosecutor's office, and it does elevate the nature of the assault to a second degree.
And I'll give you a scary statistic. A woman specifically is 750% more likely to be killed if she is strangled first. That is the penultimate act before an actual homicide, oftentimes. So that's
meaning the last act,
and then
the next one is...
Because that once a perpetrator realizes he can kill her with very little pressure really around the throat, you have what's called carotid artery dissection. I don't want to go through all the medical.
You don't have to.
Thank you. And I'm not that qualified to do it. But it's something that we do take very seriously. The bottom line is, I don't want to make light of it. We take it very, very seriously.
And we're, right now we're talking really about, a victim who is presenting herself or himself at your office in New Brunswick, who, related to a domestic violence incident. Does your agency also offer information to women primarily, or individuals who need child child care, child support information, need information about their own support in a relationship that may not be a marriage, or if it is a marriage. How do you integrate those kinds of needs, or is it only about domestic violence?
No, it's not only about domestic violence. They have their ancillary issues usually, right? Their child
Correct.
support, divorce. Oftentimes people have immigration challenges. A number of our people that come in are undocumented, and that precludes them from receiving certain services. They are scared. English may not be their first language. They oftentimes don't have the extensive education that, say, a Bob Goodwin or an Ellen Schwartz has. And they're scared. They're really absolutely scared. So we try to get them to the people that can best help them. That's really what we try to do. I don't want to mislead, though. A lot of our work is done on the phone. I would tell you that a lot of stuff that we do, we speak to people on the phone all day long, and our advocates are in court every single day. So that's really where they meet people, they talk to them. So if someone comes in and they have a TRO, a temporary restraining order, and they're called in for their hearing, which will usually happen 10 days to 2 weeks.
And that would be for the final hearing, to
That's
see whether or not the temporary order becomes a final permanent order.
Right, and that's serious stuff. In New Jersey, final restraining
serious.
orders are permanent.
Correct.
They are permanent. You go on a registry. There's all kinds of ramifications.
Fingerprinted, you find, et cetera.
Fingerprint, right, all of those things. So the advocates are in court every day, talking to people, working with people, answering questions, and facilitating the dialogue between the court staff, the judges and the domestic violence hearing officers, and the victims, who are oftentimes confused and overwhelmed. It's a lot. If they've never been in a courthouse before, and their first experience is going into a courtroom, and they're facing off against their spouse or their partner, they're scared.
And another lawyer, perhaps?
Another lawyer. They may be financially dependent on that spouse or that partner. How am I going to pay my rent? How are we going to buy food? All of those things. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into the mix, which is why I can't say enough good things about our advocates. They're wonderful. And
Are they volunteer advocates?
No.
They're all paid advocates.
Yes.
And when does the victim client meet the advocate? Before they come to court, or is that sometimes the initial time and only time, not the only time, but when they meet this
It varies. That's a great question. It varies. Sometimes they will talk to them on the phone first. Sometimes I'll talk to someone. I spoke to someone this morning. My hearing is such and such a day next week. Okay, make sure that you look for our advocates. The advocates get a list every day of the cases that are on before the particular judge that's handling domestic violence, and they go through the hallway and they check off their list. They call for people. Would you like to speak to an advocate from Women Aware? Yes, I would. Good. Let's find some quiet space. We'll go and we'll talk, and I'll try to answer your questions. They may have called them in advance. If they've spoken with an advocate in advance, they may then want to, if they've formed some kind of a bond or they've had good communication with that advocate, then maybe they want to look for that advocate in court. I should also indicate, by the way, we have a lot of bilingual staff. And I can read you the languages that they speak, 13 different languages. American Sign Language, Arabic, Gujarati, Nepali, Mandarin, Creole, Hindi, Punjabi, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, I'm going to butcher this one, Telugu, is that right?
I know it's an Indian language.
I'm probably butchering, I sincerely apologize, and Urdu.
I believe Urdu.
So that's one of the things that they look for in staff, someone who can speak a language that a victim will be comfortable speaking.
So I think a piece of advice to our audience is if a person is not able to communicate in English and they speak a foreign language, it would behoove them to seek out your assistance in advance so we can get the right advocate who speaks their language, rather than trying to search for that person, because that may not happen that day.
Absolutely, and we would be remiss if language became a barrier.
Right.
And if there's language that we don't speak, or our staff does not speak, we have Language Line, and we can work effectively. That's a service center, and we can call and get an individual who speaks the language that the victim is most comfortable communicating in, and we work that way.
You as an attorney in the past, and I don't know whether or not you represented defendants who are the alleged perpetrator of domestic violence. It's not criminal in nature, but it has a lot of attributes of a quasi-criminal proceeding, although the burden of proof is a lesser burden.
Right.
How do you advocate, that's maybe not the right word, but impart the necessary information to the victim how to deal with this adversarial system, especially when the other side has an attorney, and oftentimes they don't. And yeah, and your organization can't represent them.
No, we do not have staff attorneys, and again, I do not practice law anymore. That's the challenge every day. That is the challenge. Sitting with people, talking through these things, trying to prepare them for what they may face in court, trying to explain to them how to introduce a document and evidence, what's going to be relevant for a judge to consider and what's not, making sure that they print out the text messages that they want to move into evidence or that they have their video queued up, making sure, and this is an important piece, they have to bring their own laptop to the courthouse. People think, oh, I have it on a thumb drive, I can just plug it in at the courthouse. You can't. If that thumb drive is corrupted, you're going to bring down Middlesex County. So they have to bring in their own laptop, and people will say, oh, thank you for telling me that. I wouldn't have thought of that. So things like that. We try to prepare them for what it's going to look like when they're in a courtroom.
And a lot of these persons, these victims, really can't afford private counsel.
They can't, but I will say this, and I want to give all of the respect and accolades to our colleagues that I possibly can. We have a wonderful, and you and I had cases together
right,
over
that
the
is
years.
Correct.
You and I have known each other for a long time. And we have wonderful colleagues who do this work. They have been fantastic about accepting representation of victims on a pro bono basis. If we have a case, and that's part of what I do, is try to sort of sift through what cases I think really need specific representation, a strong advocate, or if for some reason one of the pro bono organizations can't take them, there may be a conflict, they may be overwhelmed with cases at a particular time. So there are sometimes I have to reach out to our colleagues and ask them, and they have been wonderful about responding. I mean, really.
And
great.
under what circumstances does Legal Services of New Jersey, of Central Jersey, get involved in representing victims?
Well, they have their own criteria, so we encourage people to call them. They have their own screening process. There's a financial threshold, and if you earn above the financial threshold, I think you don't qualify. I don't want to speak for them.
Right, but you refer them. You may qualify for
Yes.
legal services.
Yes.
Now, to what extent have you found, and I think this is important, a defendant, an alleged perpetrator, has counsel. To what extent does counsel who represents that person, who's trying to maybe resolve a case globally, reach out to your counselors, your advocates in the courthouse to see if there is a way to resolve the case, perhaps short of a final restraining order? Does that happen?
It does. It does. Our advocates are trained to be, I would tell you, they're a conduit for communication. I would say it that way. It's not their role to negotiate. It is their...
No, not to negotiate. Correct.
Right. It is not their role to give legal advice, and they're very careful. Our advocates, they know their boundaries, they know their lane, and they stay in their lane. But they can facilitate communication between defendant's counsel and the client. And they can explain, for example, what a civil consent order looks like.
Civil restraints,
civil restraints, a civil consent order, right. They can explain to them, and people are often confused, well, I don't know, what does this mean? Well, you're going to have to dismiss your temporary restraining order, but you're going to walk out of court with this order, and it's going to talk about the things that are important to you. Maybe it'll set a custody and parenting time schedule. Maybe it'll talk about how the rent's going to be paid or the mortgage is going to be paid, the car insurance, medical insurance, all of those
all
issues.
The issues.
Right. Sometimes they'll incorporate it in that. Oh, okay. And they say, well, what should go in here? Well, tell us the things that are of concern to you. What are you worried about? What are you most worried about? How are your bills paid? Who pays them? Those kinds of things. So kind of encouraging the clients to work through what the issues are.
Good. Now, I know that a couple of things that you mentioned the hotline.
Yes.
We didn't really talk about housing as a part of the benefits that are offered or the assistance that's provided. What kind of housing options do people have who seek your needs?
That's the single toughest issue that we contend with as a service agency. And I think if you went throughout New Jersey, you would find that most of the agencies would tell you the same thing. We do have a safe house. It is limited. For a while, particularly during COVID, they were doing hotel placements. I don't know how much longer we're going to be doing that. That's of a limited nature. It's tough.
But you do have a safe house.
We do have a safe house.
How many rooms in the safe house?
I think it's 24 persons.
24-bed emergency shelter.
Yes.
Okay, that's
correct.
And it's a confidential location.
Absolutely.
And a person who is in that safe house could be well assured that the assailant will not know where that person is.
We do everything within our power to make sure that they are safe. We take confidentiality more seriously than anything else.
And we talked about the advocacy. That's what we primarily
Yes.
focused on. I'm just looking
Yes.
at the things that we just want to touch upon.
Yes.
And I want to talk about one last thing that we, some new legislation.
Yes.
And you were involved in this. The New Jersey State Senate adds coercive control language to the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act. Explain that to our audience so they get a better understanding of this remedy.
Sure. I think sometimes people have a misperception that all domestic violence is physical, that there has to be some kind of an assault or a weapon, a stabbing, a shooting, a throwing of something. It's not always...
Or harassment.
Harassment, right. Yeah, I'm not going through it. There are 19,
I know,
as we know,
19
19 separate acts under the statute.
Right.
And initially, coercive control was discussed as a 20th separate act. It got worked over, as legislation often does, and what ultimately is happening now is it's something that a judge has to consider if the judge is contemplating entering a final restraining order. What is coercive control? It is a loss of freedom. It is a loss of financial freedom, sexual or reproductive freedom, the ability to go out with your friends, the ability to work when you want and where you want, the ability to kind of, live your life in a way that you would want to live your life. It is the threat hanging over you that something bad is going to happen. If I'm supposed to be home at 5:30 and I don't come home until 5:45 because I got stuck in traffic, there's going to be a problem. There's going to be questions. There's going to be anger. There's going to be upset.
So it's not a separate cause of action as set forth in the domestic violence complaint,
Right.
but it's factors that a judge has to consider
Yeah.
whether or not to issue a final restraining order. For example, if there is harassing communications that are coercive in nature, the judge has to really focus on that.
Well, yeah, but it's not only harassive communications. It's a little bit hard
You
to...
have 30 seconds.
Oh.
Go ahead. Yeah.
It's a little bit hard to pin down. It's a series of behaviors that cause people to feel that they do not have any freedom to move about in their own lives. That's the best way I can phrase it.
Okay, and the judge has to consider it.
Yes,
in the past,
now
the
it's
judge,
mandatory
and,
that the
and
judge
that's,
consider
that's
it.
the change in the law.
Yes, and we think it's important.
Okay, any final words?
732
Go ahead.
249-4504 is our hotline. Please feel free to call. You can reach the Family Justice Center at 258-0440. That's our intake specialist. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, Ellen, thank you so much. I mean, this was, for me, very enlightening as well, and I hope that our audience appreciates the work that you're doing and the nature of your organization. And it really is an adjunct to the court system and necessary, and it's been around now for 40 years, and it seems like it's growing. So, yeah.
Thank you, Bob. I'm very proud of the work that we do, and I'm very proud to work with this organization.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.